Hello, friends. Thanks for being on time. We're going to get started in just one moment.
How you feeling?
Amazing. You look gorgeous.
You're so sweet. Yeah. I've been trying to live up to the title. You know what
I've been looking forward to this for my whole life.
I'm
Um, but
saying?
but I'm so
Whole life.
happy. I'm so happy you're here. I'm really, really happy you're here. And yeah, I think that I see my team on. So I think we can get started since it's recorded. And so I'm going to actually introduce the session and my dear friend. I see that a lot of folks that are in here are WTF regulars. But I want to, since this is going to be recorded and there are folks who don't know who you are, Jerry, I'm going to do like the whole thing of like introducing you. So let me share my screen. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so here we are at Black August, WTF Safety Net webinar series. And I wanted to start us with a poem um, by Leonard Peltier, Aboriginal Sin. We each begin in innocence. We all become guilty. In this life, you find yourself guilty of being who you are. Being yourself, that's Aboriginal sin, the worst sin of all. That's a sin you'll never be forgiven for. We Indians are all guilty, guilty of being ourselves. We're taught that guilt from the day we're born. We learn it well. To each of my brothers and sisters, I say, be proud of that guilt. You are guilty only of being innocent, of being yourselves, of being Indian, of being human. Your guilt makes you holy. So, for those of you who are new to this space, I'm Dania Davy, the founder of Land and Liberation LLC. I'm the proud mom of an 11-year-old and the activist, author, attorney, founder of Land and Liberation, which is a consultancy promoting liberatory relationships between humans, natural and financial resources, and WTF is a learning community for small scale farmers, land stewards, and their supporters to collectively build our local solidarity economies. What does Black August have to do with WTF? For those who were at last week's session or saw the video, as you know, Black August is really rooted in rebellion against the prison industrial complex and all of the carceral realities that we live under in the United States. And so it's a time for remembering, reflecting, honoring the wisdom of Black political prisoners, freedom fighters, and the revolutionaries who sacrificed their freedoms for our liberation from colonization, racial capitalism, imperialism, and of course the prison industrial complex. And what that has to do with WTF is that all of our movements, the movements for food justice, land justice, environmental justice, they're actually layered in on top of these commitments of these liberationists that were committed to liberation for all. Today's session, we're going to be exploring an end to endemic Afro-Indigenous food insecurity in the Atchafalaya River-Basin. And I know that I did not say that right, and that's okay because Jerry is here to correct and repair my mispronunciation. We're going to be discussing Afro-Indigenous food insecurity and key issues impacting the region, ecological changes, vulnerabilities, coastal erosion, land loss, toxic pollution from chemical plants and oil refineries, and more. And so, for those of you who haven't met Jerry, although if you're a part of the WTF fam, you know she's an OG. Jerry is an independent researcher and conceptual art journalist who has been working in the field of ancestral repatriation for the last 5 years. She is also the founder and director of WHET, an environmental intimacy initiative that centers the Black Indigenous Feminine Consciousness. This evolving body of work reflects beliefs and aesthetics of this identity as it presents itself in the Gulf South region. I will not read her entire bio. I will allow her to do a full introduction. But before we're joined by Jeri for her remarks, I wanted to just kind of give a little framing of, it's Black August. So, like, Black August, Indigenous liberation, like these are things that I know Jerry's going to dive deeply into. But I'm going to just give a little bit of background context, broad context, and then Jerry's going to zoom us all the way in on where her family and community are mounting the revolution. So again, Leonard Peltier, if you don't know who he is, you should absolutely read his story. He's one of the freedom fighters that we honor during this time of Black August. And this quote just really speaks to why I wanted to talk about our communities, because Leonard said, only one thing's sadder than remembering you were once free, and that's forgetting you were once free. And you all who have been with WTF know I'm a huge Walter Rodney fan. And so you'll see some Walter Rodney citations in the presentation. But I really have been sitting with, how do we go to the future without really understanding our path, and not just in relation to white supremacist racial capitalism. I think that some of what revolution means is realizing that our yardstick for violence is based on racist white supremacist notions. And, in the field of understanding, like the anthropological study around international development, the question of a developed nation versus an underdeveloped nation, I just think is a really, really interesting play on words that the colonizer, it really embedded in so much of our consciousness. And so Walter said, a racist streak is never far from the surface in bourgeois presentations on the problems of development, because non-European people are equated with backwardness and stagnation, while progress is uniquely European. And so I wanted to start with that quote because I highly recommend that every revolutionary read Walter Rodney. His entire How Europe Underdeveloped Africa is available at that link. So you have complete access to the entire book, and I highly recommend this book. It was one of the books that really schooled me on the foundation of the realities of our world. But one thing that Walter does really well is that he reminds us that by the 15th century, Africans everywhere had arrived at a considerable understanding of the total ecology of the soils, climate, animals, plants, and their multiple interrelationships. And that's why Africa was so advanced in terms of trade routes and agricultural production as a continent. Similarly, Native communities of Turtle Island also organized entire societies and political structures around food resource management and saw themselves as inextricably connected to water and land relatives. And so just a couple of very, very bird's eye view, policies that gave us the realities that we've inherited today related to the lack of regard for indigenous sovereignty. There were over 400 treaties, which were broken promises made by the US government to indigenous peoples. What was promised in these treaties were articles of subsistence. So that's where, when we were talking last week about folks getting rations and commodities and highly processed foods that were disconnected from their ancestral diets, that was one of the promises made to indigenous peoples, as well as access to traditional agricultural lands and or access to agricultural implements or livestock. So these treaties acknowledge that indigenous peoples had a broad range of ecological expertise in the communities where they resided. And that's why part of what they wanted was just enough to continue to grow, raise, produce food for their communities themselves. And then in 1830, we know the history of the Indian Removal Act, which completely separated and displaced so many tribes from the lands that had been the foundation of not just their food systems, but their political and cultural and spiritual realities. Further, we know that the 1887 Dawes Act is where the communal ways of stewarding land as collectives was really, really attacked. So the government recognized there was something inherently problematic about communal land stewardship that was in direct opposition to white supremacist racial capitalism. And so it's really important to think about, the need for individual title, the need for individual land ownership, right? Any kind of individual rights privileged above the rights of nature were fundamental and inherent to the creation of racial capitalism. And so I just wanted to highlight four of the things that I think that our Black, Indigenous, and our, Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island have fundamental similarities between our two communities. And I think possibly, I talk about the Maroons a lot. I think that some of these like fundamental similarities are why, despite language differences and cultural differences, there was some really early integration and alignment and political alignment between these communities. So they both had unparalleled ecological expertise. If you look in the Library of Congress at what the colonists' understanding of these lands were, it was less than zero. Like they had no construct at all about anything, about the rivers, about the soil, about the types of plants. And so they were at a significant deficit in comparison to displaced Native American peoples, as well as the displaced Afro-Indigenous peoples that were kidnapped and trafficked to this land. The pace of development in these two groups of indigenous peoples match the pace of communal ecological stewardship, as well as deeply interdependent networks and trade routes. And so I really wanted us to remember, like, these weren't just, these ideas that we have of people being underdeveloped. Like, they were just developing their society, their politics, their governance structures at a pace that matched relationship with natural resources. Another significant key similarity between these communities is there was extensive spiritual and ritual diversity between indigenous peoples. I think there's this idea of like conflation and erasure of distinctions between and amongst tribes. And the reality was there was no unifying identity. So there wasn't a white Christian identity that folks could assimilate into and then see themselves in opposition to others that they met. So it's really important to remember that folks didn't see strangers. They saw folks as different folks that they could possibly build and trade with. And so the white construct of all of these people are subhuman and they're all in this one category, that was completely misaligned from these two groups of indigenous peoples. And then obviously displacement from homeland disrupts relationship to nature, ceremony, ritual, language, freedoms, as well as access to traditional foods. And with that, I'm going to invite Jeri to jump in and share with us and allow us to learn from your brilliance and wisdom.
Thank you, Dania. Um, so quick question. Is it possible for you to pull up the slides that I dropped into that
I,
slide?
if for some reason, I wasn't able to access them, but if you drop the link, that do you have it as a deck or do you have it as
I have it as um, I have it as
the same file that I shared with you?
all that you shared with me.
Okay. Let me see. For some reason, the Canva wouldn't allow me to pull your slides in.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Let me see what I can do. What's the best way to do it? I
Probably drop it in the chat, or
do
you
it on
can share your screen actually, unless you need help sharing, if you need help clicking.
sharing. However, I'm wondering, and I'm using my phone to do the presentation.
Okay.
Could I email you the link real quick?
Yes, let's do that, and then I can get my team to support.
What's funny is this is hilarious. The way my computer is playing this game about me even sending you this email. Hold on one second.
No problem.
And
Um,
but so let me just also, as soon as I do this send, I'm going to basically just say, first, for starters, thank you for not just inviting me, but also for providing this title, which I just sent you the link, which forced, and so my slides started after the slides in yours originally. Let me know if you can access it. Otherwise, I'll just keep going. But I put all these amazing images in the presentation that I hoped people would share so that I would be talking about a place they could actually see. Um, the title forced me to think differently about the subject. And I was like freaking out. I was like, just go with it. I was like, just go with it. You know, Dania's so smart. If she thinks that we should name this ending endemic food insecurity in your region, you just gotta go. You just gotta go with it. So the last week and a half for me has been this portal deep dive framed by you deciding to state it from the goalpost, and so that is huge and deeply powerful and has for sure guided how I'm showing up today to the best of my ability. So thank you for that. Um, if these slides come up, I trust that they will, even if they're behind me. I want to just go ahead and jump into what I plan to do. There's some things I want to say up top so I don't lose anything. So yeah, the title forced me to prepare and think differently about the structure of the conversation. So I'm gonna tell you what I'm gonna say, and then I'm gonna try to say it. I'm gonna tell you the amazing things about the Atchafalaya River-Basin and show you some of the people living there. I'm gonna survey the challenges and the complex crises that we're facing and do my best to narrate the history, both old and modern, briefly, that established the basin, the Atchafalaya Basin, as a liberatory stronghold, even despite the challenges. And with the end at the beginning, I'll say that the basin itself and everything it has taught us and everything it continues to teach us is the answer to ending food insecurity for Black natives in the region. Um, I'm centering myself in the conversation because I don't have another viewpoint. I come from a Black Indigenous community, a Black Native community. So when I say that, I'm not speaking exclusively. I'm speaking from my point of departure. So will you go back real quick to the previous slide, the title slide? I just want to give a quick image ID. These are for anyone that can't see the images. These are large cypress trees and a dear friend. Her name is Jasmine Jernigan. She's a Black Native woman of Black African and Caddo Indian descent in North Louisiana. And this is an image for her, a maternity shoot beside Cross Lake. And so I just wanted to, in the way that Black indigeneity is so often erased and disappeared and subsumed beneath Blackness, which we love, which has been a deep point of survival, both for an African trajectory on this landmass and an important point of survival for an indigenous trajectory on this landmass. Because, of course, we could not be killed. Of course we could be killed, and also we're still here in this way. And so some of the invisibility has allowed us to continue to thrive in ways that, genocidal attempts have not been able to get us all. And then also, as too with the Hispanic community, there's so much erasure there around true identity. So I just wanted to say that for most Black Indigenous people outside of this context, there's no level of proof of who you are that you can ever offer that will satisfy the appetite for people looking to do that. For me, I'm a focus on location and just tell you where my people have been for at least up to 6 identifiable generations, and the broader community. And that's what you'll see here. These images are mine from this era of my life where I was not just doing photography, but doing archival photography because we were losing land. And I wanted to focus on strategic visibility. Will you change the slide now for me, please? Thank you. So quick image ID. This is a Black Native elder woman sitting on her bed, Indian style, as they like to say, holding dolls that represent the composition of her ancestry. This is my elder, Amelie Prescott. I'm at her house now. She has been an ancestor now for about 2 years, and she was an amazing healer, artist, teacher, mentor. I'll be quoting her throughout the presentation. She was born in New Orleans, but her parents were born and are buried in the same region as my people are from, which is Central Louisiana, Pineville. We are, in fact, same tribe. So also, I just want to quickly read these names beside her. These are not all of the original people of the area, but these are the ones whose names have survived into perpetuity around their originating around the basin. And the first one is usually credited as the Chittimancha, the Homa to the deep south, pushing up on the Gulf, the Tunica Biloxi, which is the federally recognized tribe from the region that both of my parents are from. I'm gonna show you a map real soon. Both of my parents are from either sides of what is now this Tunica Biloxi reservation, but the last 3 of those names on this, which I'll read on this slide, were subsumed within the Tunica Biloxi in order for them to stitch together these smaller tribes to get this federal recognition, which only happened in 1981. These people called themselves the Huron before the folding, the people from this top of the river basin. And of course, there were many tribes living around and through there because it was so rich and it was so lush. And of course, it is a navigable waterway. So the Chittimancha, the home of the Tunica Biloxi, the Atchafalaya Ishak, the Caddo, the Appaloosa, the Bayou Gula, the Avoyal, the Ofo, and the Choctaw. There are many tribes in my blood I don't always disclose, but I think the bigger dynamic is this reality that few of these tribes could survive alone. And so most of the names you see here have been so heavily blended throughout the region. Not to mention that indigenous tribes who were there fled to the swamps, specifically to avoid colonization, forced relocation, continuous genocidal onslaughts. Will you change for me, please? Thank you. Okay, this is maybe one of the most important images to me. Image ID. That's my little cousin Lauren. She's laying beside a bayou, right on the side of my grandmother's house. And this is not a permanent body of water. This is overflow from the Red River, which you'll see in the very next slide, flows into the Atchafalaya. So this is our land. It's an unincorporated community called Ruby, Louisiana, that is, you know, it's maroon territory. It backs up to the Red River. My people have been there a very long time. They are in fact still there. Not as many of us as were originally there, but are in fact still there. And I just want to get into some of the undeniable ecological facts about the Atchafalaya River-Basin, starting with the fact that it is the largest freshwater basin on this landmass, not the United States, on the continent of North America. Change, please, if you don't mind. Thank you so much, Daniel, for doing this for me. All right, now, so I had asked the AIs, the people on the chat, to make this little diagram for me, and they left out the line of the Black River. You can see the Red River and the Mississippi River, and the Black River, it really flows right down the middle, straight into the green. Well, sort of straight into the green. Actually, the Black River flows into the red, and the red flows into the Atchafalaya, and the Mississippi meets them. And that whole green region is a floodplain. And yeah, it floods seasonally, and it represents, like, let me focus on my notes. I'm so excited. It is the largest contiguous set of uninterrupted forested wetlands in the United States, for sure. I'm pretty sure on this landmass as well. And that's powerful, not just because it's one of the last land building river basin, flood delta areas left in the world. The Nile has been so limited that it no longer builds land, but the Atchafalaya still does. They pull about 22 million pounds of crawfish out of the Atchafalaya every year, along with so much other rich food, but it's 70% habitat. They say it's about a million, just under a million acres. That's the quote of acreage on the Atchafalaya Heritage Area. But we should all be deeply aware and concerned that this river basin is the largest uninterrupted contiguous forest on this landmass. You know what I mean? You think that there's a lot of protected land, and there is, but we are living in a time where certain things are increasingly more exceptional. So even while I was preparing, I was learning more and more updated information. And those are things that I knew. Yeah. Please change. Oh, this is the Red River. This is also a friend of mine. She's Black and Filipino. But we did this shoot on the Red River, and the Red River is actually red. The sediment and the nutrients that it carry, it shows up in the clay, in the soil, in the river itself. And the Black River has a Black appearance. It's the tannins from decaying vegetation that make the Black River look Black. And so even in that photo, you can't see how red it looks. It almost looks sandy. But in fact, a different image would show this deep red. Thank you. Will you please change? Okay, real quick on the ID. This is my little cousin Cayman. He don't look too little. He's tall. He's in all maroon because, deep identity. And then here is one of these, little generated things to highlight how significant the basin is. These are the general things. that time check 1 hour left. These are the general things that allow people to understand the context both within the region, within the continent, and globally. And so globally, the Atchafalaya Basin is compared to river basins such as the Amazon, such as the Congo River floodplains, and the Mekong that in Cambodia and Vietnam. And so that's kind of where we are. It's also a major corridor for wildlife. Millions of birds traffic through back and forth every year. I don't know if I'm missing anything. Please change for me. Thank you. So this is my same friend again, also in her maroon, and it's just a survey of all of the things that we produce and have been producing agriculturally, not just for the region but for the nation, in addition to being like a major export zone. So these are things that we actually grow. At one point, we were like number 2 in agriculture. I'm being led to believe that maybe that's no longer true. But in case that print is too small for you to read or you're moving around, we are number 1 exporting crawfish, really high in sugarcane, rice, soybeans, corn, sweet potatoes, pecans, um, livestock of all kinds, cotton, of course. Some of these things have changed recently because of dynamics that Dania mentioned, like the government limiting how much you can produce. Um, but I just want to also express that we grow food and send food everywhere. Will you change for me, please? Unfortunately, there are just under 1 million people in the state of Louisiana that are documented as experiencing food insecurity, um, which blows my mind. And also, I can't help but acknowledge that if that's what's documented, there's so much that's not documented. And of course, when we say food insecurity, we mean deficiencies of nutrients and food that actually nourishes you, of course. About 250,000, just under 250,000 of these documented people experiencing food insecurity are in fact children. And that, according to this organization, that plays out to about 1 in 6 people in the state. And of course, these numbers are highest in Black communities, in Hispanic communities, which we know are also indigenous people for the most part, and even Asian communities. And I don't even believe we have a high Asian population, but even nearly a quarter of their communities are struggling with food insecurity. And so we know that this is very much so about access and not about what's not there, but it's impacting Black and indigenous communities, even people indigenous to other places who have traveled here, more than it impacts anyone else. Please change the slide for me, please. These are the next 2 slides are the things that we are dealing with that make this more of a complex crisis than just food insecurity. This is an image of a dear friend who is Jamaican, who was living in New Orleans. This is by the levees in the lower Nine, and I think I took this about 10 years ago. So right around the halfway point between 10 years after Katrina. Um, and then, of course, the 20-year anniversary is coming up. And it was just very reflective of so many things to me. But I am going to read these quotes out loud for anyone that's not in front of a screen, because I didn't want to get these statements wrong. And so I just wanted to lean on, expertise to illuminate these challenges. So, quote, the combination of taming the Mississippi River, which cut off the free flow of fresh water and sediment to the wetlands, and the man-made destruction of the alluvial soil resulted in the loss of over 1 million2,000 square miles of coastal land between 1930 hours. We'll know it was a football field. In total, this reduces to the open Gulf of Mexico and the impacts of dangerous tropical weather systems than they were ago. And so I just want to lift there. A lot of indigenous communities, you know, no matter how mixed they were. I just want to go back just a little. What happened? What's going on? Am I cutting out? Oh no. Can y'all hear me? Yes, you can hear me. Okay. Well, essentially what I wanted to say is that thank you. So sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't even know I was cutting out. Native communities fled to the swamp and specifically to the Atchafalaya Basin. Thank you. And specifically to the Atchafalaya Basin to avoid these larger dynamics of captivity, enslavement, and genocide. And so some exclusively Native communities were in some of these little interior islands. And so one of these communities has already had to be relocated off of their island because that's how much land that has been lost. And I don't know if I can get to that specific statistic fast enough to read the precise numbers of land they lost, but they've got about they don't have enough acreage left to live on. So they've already been relocated because their land is now gone. Obviously, land loss impacts food security because people who were feeding themselves, not just in their gardens, but with trees, pecans and fruit trees, all of these things that grow naturally and so vibrantly in this area are literally losing the actual land. And our actual lifespans and trajectories are very much are very much reflective of not only the loss of land, but even the loss of wildlife. So for example, and I'm going to move quickly because I don't want to talk, but the brown pelican was endangered for a time in the state. And it was because of a particular pesticide that was being used on crops in Louisiana. And it almost wiped the pelicans out. And now, right, the pelican, they were endangered, they can fly. A lot of them left. Many are returning to this as a safe place. But our numbers of cancer are among the highest in the nation. And some of that with air pollution, but some that also has to do with poisonous dynamics going into the water, going into the land, specifically the end of the pipeline that started at Standing Rock. And so there's been a lot of indigenous movement solidarity to keep that pipeline from not going through the Atchafalaya because it is very much liver, kidney, high level filtration system for this entire land mass. Very grateful, very grateful because we're not seeing, but because solidarity across movements in record continue to survive. That's coming up is just an acknowledgement of our oil and gas economy and the role that the oil and gas economy has played in decreasing not just fertility of the Atchafalaya Basin, but even in the loss of land. And so there is over 10,000 miles of artificials through a very kind of soggy swamp bottom area by oil and gas companies. And so the biggest, more recent challenges of the Atchafalaya Basin due to land loss have due to attempted, well, not attempted, but actually Mississippi so that it doesn't to feed and replenish because So at many places, so it's not flow that is land. And then, of course, the dredging of companies. Once we go to that next slide. Am I talking too much? Do I need to take a break? Can people hear me?
No, you don't need to take a break, but there was a little bit of glitchy in your audio.
Sorry, yikes. I don't even know what to do. Oh, I know. Let me try this. Let me see if this will help. Is this better? Audio
Still a little glitchy. I'm
better.
wondering if you turn your camera off, if that will help, because there was still a little glitch on my end.
Let me see.
I'm not sure. It seems on my end that Jerry's audio has stopped. Are there others that are having that experience as well? Okay, so while we patiently wait for her to return, because I'm on the edge of my seat, this is so deeply inspiring and informative to me. Um, I think I will just invite us to pause as we wait for her eventual return.
Y'all, my look, my entire phone shutting off is crazy. My entire phone shutting off is crazy. I don't know. Welcome. Thank you. I'm sorry. I don't know what anyone has heard or not heard. Has it been really bad, Dania?
We heard most of what you said. It was just the last little bit where you on the last slide. At the end of the last slide, you started to go out, and now you're completely
Word.
perfect.
Thank you. I had to switch devices. My phone shut completely down. Let me tell you how busy the devil is. Now, the last thing I said was in fact about this 10,000 miles of artificial canals by the oil and gas companies and how it has altered the delta's hydrology. And I'm going to get into what I think are solutions, which are really ways of thinking. But uh, yeah, yeah, it's not just the pollution in the air, it's also the manipulation of the land as it is underwater and the not respecting the balance that has to occur there in order for us to continue to live in the rich environment that we do live in. Thank y'all for your patience. And if you'll change the next slide for me, I think there's only like one or two more. Word. Okay. Another image of my elder. And I just wanted to match Dania's energy and assert the Atchafalaya Basin as a liberatory ecology. It has, in fact, been a channel, a vehicle, a dimension, a container, an entire world of liberation and freedom for such a long, long, long time that even in this moment where we are forced to defend and protect the Atchafalaya River Basin to the same degree that it has, in fact, protected and defended us, we have solid evidentiary proof that we have everything we need, quite literally, to be more than okay. It is one of the reasons why we are targeted, similar to the Congo, similar to these other rich, wealthy regions that have, in fact, more than enough. Um, I had some of the very same liberatory mechanisms. I wanted to draw a distinction between uh, a stronghold of liberation, a vehicle of liberation, a channel of liberation, and mechanisms developed within that ecosystem, ecology, cosmology. And mine were very similar to Dania's, very much so the spiritual and ritual practices that are the resistance of the blending of so many cultures and so many tribes. I want to draw a straight line from us to the Nigeria Delta, excuse me, the Niger Delta in Nigeria, excuse me. They are also oil rich. They have a similar ecology. Of course, Dania is so early on time at referencing the obvious expertise that would have come from these West Africans as they arrive in an ecology that is in fact very, very fucking familiar. The Sudan also has a Delta River Basin. Um, you know, these occur in spaces in a very particular way. And so everyone who showed up here would have known to some degree how to navigate, you know, quite literally. So yeah, um, very precise spiritual, powerful resistance, rituals, spiritual gifts that developed and were refined through lineages to live and maneuver through the swamp and keep these spaces free. My own family, we have a dream network where we share dreams with each other, and the network itself becomes archival. So if you have a dream that you remember, that's worth sharing, and you tell someone, by the time there's a manifestation in reference to that dream, your whole bloodline will have known that you dreamt it first from the day and the time. Remember when you called your mama and said. And so we typically do this dream check-in in the morning around coffee because that's the time. But these are things that we've developed to navigate um, effectively in a place that floods seasonally, where the overflow is in fact what brings the nutrient-rich fertility. Another one, and I want to reference specifically Jamaica, is our medicinal herbs, our powerful plant medicine traditions that are not only healing, but liberatory, right? They're so interdimensional. There's so much intelligence in that. And so there is this current Jamaican documentary on Queen Nanny of the Maroons. And I believe it's called Queen Nanny of the Maroons. And the documentary focuses on her as a forest herbalist, as a master of of her place. And there is no freedom within these captive spaces outside of swamps and mountains where the ecology protects and defends people. And so, because I come from an ecology that acknowledges these spaces as myself, that literally feeds me, that allows me to exist, I recognize not just the identity in the human, but the identity of the human coming from the place. Because it's, you know, what is that Blue Mountain coffee that they make in Jamaica in that, at that high elevation. You know what I mean? Because, anyways, so I just wanted to identify that liberation and liberatory mechanisms, even within larger attempts at captivity and subjugation, is deep identity, not just for the basin, but for everything that comes out of the basin, everything that's attached to it. Okay, will you please change slides for me? This is my last little slide. It's just a little sum up, I swear, and then we could talk about all the things. So it says solutions and sovereignty, and these are ways of thinking straight from my elder whose face you just saw. She reminds me in a poem that she wrote that from the poison comes the medicine. And my personal belief is that if it's true in one dimension, it's true in all dimensions. So for those of us who deal and make medicines, who carry medicine, we know that it's a transmutation. We know that it is an alchemical process. And to go right into where this comes from, she also reminds me and has taught me that the most radical indigenous belief is our belief in the capacity to heal, right? Otherwise, you pathologize everything and it's giving very much doomsday. But even when they cut our forests, they do in fact grow back, right? I forget exactly what river it was, I think out in California, that they undammed, and these native kids got in the river and did their canoe route, and then their salmon were back. I come from a place with the spirit of the alligator, not just the gator, but the spirit of the gator, right? Which will lie in wait and make for thousands of years until you think it's dead. You know what I mean? And I know I'm getting so excited, but I wanted to invoke that because European and Western timelines date alligators, their dating system, anywhere from at around the oldest at 65 million years and around the youngest at 37 million years. So the one thing we know for sure is that they actually have no damn idea. They just have a window of around 30 million years, right? And of course, the crocodile predates the alligator, right? Coming out of the cradle of all life and civilization at 95 million years that they think they can quantify. And so this is the Black Native identity that I'm plugging into. This is what I come from, and we will be okay. We have all these things going on. It needs attention, it needs our focus, it needs our consciousness. And I also want to invoke the spirit of the brown pelicans, because they come into the picture according to these other timelines right around 30 million years ago. You know what I'm saying? But in terms of wind, in terms of air and water slash land dwellers, um, the basin is an archive of a living archive of ancient genetic life forms. And so the things that come out of that are deeply reflected in that reality. My elder was a trauma healer, and she reminded me to stay conscious and stay in the room, right? Because the hallmark of trauma is dissociation. And so in that way, it's a fracturing of the spirit, whereby of yourself are shut down, can survive. And in that state, you show up literally in pieces, right? And so I would say this is a time where we need to do the things that must be done to protect that consciousness. I also affirm Dania, who's always telling people to take shifts. You can't be on go all the time if the game is long. If it's the 65 million year game, you know, it's not about the next 2 years. It's about building so much far beyond that. Student of Ella Baker, strong people don't need strong leaders. I'm always interested in not just building my own capacity, but building the capacity of my networks and communities, which this platform represents. I'm so grateful. And then the final reminder that we are actually, in fact, positioned in the best possible location to thrive. But the goal is to not just endure, but to protect and restore, because that's what's called for. If the land can be lost, it can be restored. If it can be harmed, it can be healed. And if it's true in one dimension, it's true in all dimensions. Send us land. Send us land and hold space on your altars and in your consciousness for the revival of these sacred ecologies that are in fact currently thriving, that have in fact withstood all the things, but do require our attention and our focus now, along with the communities that are attached to them. Thank you for giving me space to uplift these identities. And sorry about my little technical issues or whatever, don't blame it wasn't even me. It wasn't even me.
Listen, when Oof. Oof, oof, oof. Jeri.
Ashe. Thank you for holding this space. Let me tell you something. I'm so grateful for all the liberation that Jamaica is always carrying. There is so liberation that Jamaica has put on her back. It is in fact her season of liberation. I am not confused about the people that we need to get through this moment. And again, what the Hopi say, it's not about what happens now, it's about who's in the river with you. I'm so grateful for you. I'm so grateful for you.
When I tell you that I I would say right around COVID, around that COVID lockdown era, um, that's when I first started hearing this communication from Queen Nanny. And I've said it on WTF many times about how, being raised specifically Seventh day Adventist Christian, there was a significant way in which, like Leonard Peltier's poem talks about the Aboriginal sin, that there were ways in which the spiritual access that I have always had felt wrong. It felt devilish. It felt, all of those things. And Queen Nanny started letting me know that, you know, we were born in this moment for this moment. And I wanted to call in one of the things that you said around endangered species. And I want to name two things. First, as an attorney, I want to name that some of the strategies that we've employed around environmental justice, specifically when we're talking about pipelines, when we're talking about the rights of nature, when we're talking about what UN has recognized in terms of taking on a role to protect, there was a conscious decision to separate off nature, animals from human rights. That was a litigation strategy that became a policy strategy. And so I want to call that up because we are an endangered species. Like literally everything that you were saying was just reminding me how endangered we have been made by institutions that preference animals over humans, when in reality, those are our kin. And that is what our ancestors deeply understood, and we continue to benefit. That's part of what we have access to in making sense of the colonial mindset that we've been assimilated into, and the spiritual reality that is just cannot be removed. Like you said, like there's no genocide for our spiritual consciousness and our spiritual realities. And so I just want to name for folks that I think there's an opportunity within the advocacy world to reintegrate the realities that our ancestors understood, and that is that we are inextricably linked to the alligator. We are inextricably linked to the pelican. We are inextricably linked to the water. And that is precisely why our ancestors were able to navigate lands, terrain, plants, peoples that they had never previously encountered. So I want to just call in that that's a possibility that we have now that the UN has recognized the rights to nature, and many constitutions around the world are incorporating the rights of nature. That is something that is available to us. Second thing that I wanted to specifically say is that Afro-Indigeneity is one of the most abused, disrespected, erased indigeneities that there is. We see this within the Native American tribes. We see this within just what our imaginations present to us when we think about an indigenous woman. That picture you shared of your elder, that was the first like tearing up of my eyes, because there's so many peoples that we know that look like that, that would not get recognized as indigenous. And there does seem to be like this, there's like this mystical thing that you're allowed to access if you're indigenous. But if you're black and indigenous, then somehow that's like bad, right? Like there's the, I think Christianity really, Christianity and white supremacy, and the ways in which we were stolen, not just those of us who can tie our ancestry back to the continent of Africa, but like we're stolen and displaced from where we naturally inhabited. And I wanted to call out that part of why we have an epidemic of missing and endangered indigenous women is because this is a nation built on missing and indigenous endangered women, period. Afro-Indigenous, Indigenous, all of us have been missing and endangered and murdered and never accounted for, and never accounted for as human beings with rights to our bodies, to the freedom of being human. And so I want to, as you're naming all of the resources, the natural resources that we are best positioned to steward, I also want to call in what you are and what your community is deserves so much regard, respect, care, compassion, love. And I feel all of that ever since we first met at the Federation. I have just deeply felt very connected to you. And I just want to express my gratitude for everything that you just shared with us. I almost was like, I felt emotional because I was like, I don't even feel like I'm worthy to know this story. And I feel just deeply, deeply blessed that you would bear witness, and share so deeply with us. So thank you so much for being here, but thank you so much for being here. Like, thank you so much to you and your entire community for being here, because you are truly the waymakers. You're the reason that we could have a liberation vision and dream. Your dream circle is the reason that we have everything we need. And so I cannot tell you, you are holy, you are sacred, you are divine, and I just want to deeply extend that and express that, with you in this moment. I think there might be some. Oh, did you want to say something, Jerry?
Yeah, I just wanted to say it's mutual. Thank you for recognizing me. I recognize you as well in the ways that we recognize each other. Thank you along this difficult trajectory of the few months you've been holding this space. You've reminded me of these mutual histories because sometimes we need to be reminded. And again, even in the framing, right? Even in the framing, it forced a different part of me to show up because it was just like you, the most, I don't know, wise and uncompromising in its goals. And so thank you for creating the space and the container to show up fully. So much of my challenge has been that the most important work I have done has needed to be so heavily cloaked so that I can stay alive. They kill Black women for less. like you said, the hunted. You know what I mean? And so it means everything to me that you created a space that's safe enough for me to show up and affirm the truth that we remain. We do in fact remain. We are in fact old. We are in fact wise. We are in fact ancient. And this little moment is just that. It's a little moment. It's a little moment. But nothing you can destroy in 50 to 70 years can erase the millennia. It doesn't erase the millennia. So we stand in a space together and, we're braiding these baskets. We're braiding these baskets with our lineages and our work and weaving everybody in. And I just want to affirm that I'm grateful. Again, my disclaimer is that this is the briefest survey I could give in the space. The reading list is in fact extensive. Well, it's not extensive. It's meant to be a survey so that you can hear some of these stats from more than me. But research isn't hard to find because everything I've said is documentable, and it's just a lot to hold in your heart. The loss of land, all of it. And so be gentle with yourself for holding space in a container like this. Someone said something like, how do you learn more about what you know? Both grandmothers, yeah. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I think that's our mutual process and our journey. You know what I mean? The thing I tell people first is sometimes trauma will have us reach all the way back for ancestors that we knew in our lifetime. And so you don't have to reach for the grandmothers you never met. You can hold on to the ones that you know. And I think that's the strongest doorway. And, that's the strongest doorway. And then also to just remember that the memory is in fact genetic. And that if we claim our ability to inherit gifts, real power, information, access, and skills, the way we claim ancestral trauma, all of our conversations will look different, which is why healing is such a powerful, the insistence on creating healing spaces is such a powerful component for liberatory vehicles because it does not, if you have to fight and resist, you will encounter wounds. I sent you the piece I wrote 10 years ago about the editor pulled out this line about there being no survivors without scars. And it's in many ways it's true, visible or invisible, but we do believe in the capacity to heal and regrow because we see it all the time. And so we must insist. And my elder, last thing I'll say before I take a pause, she used to remind me that it only takes 20 years to change the world, the span of one generation. If you focus on it, before her transition, she's behind me on the wall. It's the older portrait of her with her baby. But before her transition, she reminded me that she handed me a world she wasn't born into. Like the nerve of you to lay down. I gave you something that never existed. So, like, no excuses. No excuses. And that's, again, that's why we show up with our actual skills, our actual indigenous technologies that are actually old. You know what I mean? And she focused on the youth and training them differently and exposing them differently. And so our ability to shift things with our consciousness is because we do create worlds with our awareness, and our awareness informs how we move and what we invest in. And so much of this has been because they have harvested energy. That's what the oil is. You know what I mean? It's energy. That's what the time is. It's energy. That's what the labor is. It's energy. That's what the food is. It's energy. The livestock, the produce, everything that they're snatching, all the minerals, it's energy. And so if Black women in the South, specifically those of us with really all of us, right? When we decide to shift, this side shifts. We are literally at the mouth of the largest, arterial corridor of this place. And so our locations along the Atchafalaya are not insignificant. It is, in fact, a stronghold. And that's why you need to know about it and hold space for us, because we want complete protection for the Atchafalaya, not just for the trees, but for the water itself, as Danya mentioned, and we have to stand up like they're standing up in the Amazon, like they have stood up in other locations. And that's just the requirement. That's just the requirement. Okay, I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna take a breath
That
and pause.
that was yes to everything you said. One of the articles that I was reading to prepare for today was looking at in the residential schools and the nutritional research that was done, where they had children that they knew were consuming less than 1,500 calories, which was, by the way, the amount of calories that volunteers in a starvation study at the University of Minnesota agreed to consume so they could measure the impact of starvation on a human body. These researchers that were getting data around what minerals and what calories and how much protein we needed in our diet were observing children in indigenous residential schools where there was no consent to this research, there was no explanation to these subjects of the research, and yet the people doing those studies, the people conducting those studies, those were the doctors, those were the scientists, those were the nutrition scientists, those were the people that were saying, as European experts, we can now say what people need to eat, what people should eat. We can prescribe for people what their diet should be. And so when you get all the way down to the root of the nutritional science and the dehumanization of our ancestors, we have to remember that when we hear about these health inequities that we have continued to experience, they will want to say it's because of Cheetos, it's because of fast food. But the realities are that our food rituals were sacred practices. And that's why, for me, this calling up of memory and this calling back of consciousness, is so critical to creating what the new world will be. Because at a fundamental, like at a cellular level, our ancestors, the healers, they understood precisely the real science, right? They had the ancient human research. And this colonial paradigm around measuring cause and effect really only supports and sustains racial capitalism. So I think it's really like, for me as a lawyer, I think all the time about, and I tell the farmers this all the time. I'm like, I have acquired a particular vocabulary, right? I have acquired a particular colonial analytical framework that allows me to be a bridge between my community's reality and the colonial empire. But the truth is that racial capitalism cannot be sustained. The reason that the reason all of these shifts are happening is that the development that our ancestors were leading was interrelationship development. And that's the only one that can survive millennia, this extractive version of development. It doesn't matter, like, it literally doesn't matter how many SAT words you know if you're trying to apply that to healing our nutritional gaps, our environmental gaps, our human rights, the freedom of religion. I mean, and the fact that this all of freedom of religion revolves around Christianity is pretty obscene, because the reality is that was a very significant tool. And I mean no disrespect to people who identify as Christian. I was raised Christian. I have a lot of Christian. My family's still Christian, and I have no disrespect towards Christianity. But a reality is in those practices of Christianity that told us that our spiritual practices or evil, bad, black magic, all of those decolonial processes that we have to examine to get in tune with our ancestral knowledge, we that's part of the revolution. Folks want me to say like go burn stuff down. You have to burn down the cage inside your mind that tells you that spirit is a separate bad thing. And I think in accessing that, that's where what Jeri is inviting us to tap into can truly be tapped into.
Can I make a comment about one of the things you said in terms of indigenous diet and the removal of the diet? So so one of the great wealth, part of great wealth of my life is crawfish, is access to a place full of crawfish and magnolias. I want to talk really quick about so because the Atchafalaya is a basin that receives all of this, the flow down of nutrients in soil that converge black to red to Atchafalaya, crawfish coming out of the basin are full of nutrient rich mud. This is what they live off of. So we consume crawfish seasonally, and this is what we're eating. We're eating the nutrients out of the mud. The Tunica Biloxi, or the group that stitched themselves the Tunica Biloxi that previously called themselves the Huron, in their origin story, in their cosmology, there is a rainbow shaman that makes it rain catfish and crawfish in a drought. And so there have been these instances where they swear it was documentable that there was just fish and crawfish. That's a new fish that got out the mud, right? That there was just fish and crawfish littered on the ground, right? And so to hold space for a reality where if you are in danger, the God that you know is going to make it rain catfish and crawfish. And for people who don't live in the basin and they know these animals as scavengers, and because there's that whole biblical thing around what's clean and what's not clean. Here is the lie from the pit of hell. You know what I mean? Because this mud will actually feed you. The mud that I came out of, the clay, that red clay, is rich. It's rich in iron. It's rich in all of these specific things. So much so that the little mud bugs at the bottom, you can snatch them out the bottom and eat them and get full of nutrients. And so, anyways, I'm not gonna make the people sit through a little my little love affair with crawfish or whatever. But we have these traditions that are lifted up in ways that appear to be commercial, that have everything to do with why we continue to survive, and even throughout the things. And so, just like you were saying, so goes the crawfish, so goes my whole identity, right? But not just the crawfish, obviously the whole ecosystem. And the last thing I would offer is that I did have this little chit chat with a pelican because I really be talking to them. And if you follow me on Instagram, the post before the one I advertised for this one, this alligator got on the bank while I was walking on the river and winked at me. And if you zoom in, you can see it wink at me. I was praying. I was in deep prayer about some things, about the movement of things. And this was the response of creator and ancestors, was like, first of all, hi, how you doing? How you doing? From 65 million years, you know what I mean? Wink, wink. And this little chit chat with the pelican I had was about endangered. It was the first pelican not in a sanctuary enclosed space that I had seen in my lifetime some years ago now, maybe 5-ish years ago, around 2019. I was off the coast of Alabama at a writing conference, and there was this giant brown pelican, which is our state bird and the official bird for most of the Caribbean. And I had this little interaction with this pelican, and I was just like, it was nonverbal, but it's like, you're such a big deal. Like, I know how rare you are. Like, wow, what is it? What did you like? I don't know. What you need from me? Like, what's up? I kid you not. Pelican looked me dead in the eyes. On the you think I'm endangered, you too. I have wings, I can fly. I have wings, I can fly. This notion of, here you are out here to see me because you think I'm rare. I'm looking at you because I haven't seen many of you around these parts either, but I can fly. So even the concept of vulnerability, we are always about to be more vulnerable than these animals. If they are hunting these apex predators and these ancient ancestors, we we're already in trouble. We're already in trouble. Anyways, that's my little 2 cents. I'm done. I know I'm wearing down the time. They may have some questions. It's about to throw the wig. Look, let me tell you something. They're not playing. They're not playing out here.
I haven't seen a lot of questions come through, but y'all feel free. We have about 9 minutes left. Feel free to keep putting questions in there. I know I've shared the story before of how I got called to go back to Jamaica, but so many people assume like, oh, because of this election cycle. And it's funny because when I was going to the Indigenous Peoples Summit last week in Nebraska. I met someone on the flight whose page I follow. The page is Black Folks Camp 2. And he was like, "Oh, are you going home? Because you're like, do you need to get married real quick to have your citizenship?" And I was like, I was like, "Listen, first of all, I'm a citizen. That's number one. But number two, to what you said about the ancestor, um, I was on the land as a person who I still was like in that period of my life. This is last year. I was still in that period of my life where I was like, when you're raised in Adventism, because crawfish is one of the unclean things that we're not allowed to eat, which I do eat now. But I will say that, like it is still hard. And an indigenous brother I met when I was in New Mexico was like, it's going to be really hard for you. It's going to be really hard for me to like decolonize my belief system, and I'm finding that to be true. But that being said, this land, like as soon as I stepped on it, I felt it communicating with me. I felt the land putting the call to me. And this week I dreamt. Part of why this week I've just been like, I've been really excited. I've been really excited about this conversation. I've been really excited to just like, I want to have many more conversations with you about these topics because I had this dream, and in the dream, I was standing on the land, and it's like it's on a mountain itself, but then there's like other mountain, like it's a mountain range, so like you can see other mountains around, and I was like in the dream observing all of the protection from the mountains, like just recognizing that like Nanny got that call to go up, like to go up, and that's why a lot of the maroon sovereign territories are really in high altitudes on the island, and it's so iterative to hear about this ancestor telling you like, I'm going to protect you from being endangered, and the land literally is letting us know like, if you let me do what I need to do, if you return to communal care of the ecosystem, all I want to do is heal you. I can heal myself. Earth is undefeated. I will be fine. Like, you're you're this little, sacred thing that I'm trying to enlighten, that we can protect each other. And so it is really funny how much wisdom there are beyond what we classify as wisdom because of colonization. And so it's like, that's why the revolution, that's why Black August Revolution, when we talk about the wisdom, yes, the 60s was like super important wisdom for us to tap into as Black peoples. But we have revolutionary cells and DNA that allow us to tap into our plant, animal, water, wind, relatives, if we just allow it to be so, if we just allow it to be so. So thank you for that reminder. Thank you so much for that reminder. I haven't seen any questions in the chat, but as we're getting into the last few minutes, Jeri, I just want to invite you to, you've already shared so much, so I almost feel bad to ask, is there anything else that folks could gain from your reflections in light of this conversation that we've had today?
Thank you so much. First, I want to say shout out to the Cherokee. Somebody mentioned their place. The first time I went to the Rocky Mountains because my best friend grew up in Colorado, and I was like, "Wow, this is a big deal." But I was like, I need to find some. If I'm gonna do mountains, because I my prayers were different at a higher elevation. It was wild. All of it was wild. I was like, but I need to find some mountains that are close if I'm gonna do mountains. Because I don't have any real experience with elevation, quite literally. So I went to the Smokies. I went to this indigenous conference, environmental conference in the Smokies in Cherokee, North Carolina. That ancestor, well, I think this is the traditional name. That ancestor's breath is so observably sacred. First of all, who knew it was an entire rainforest? Our little trash public education system, we have amazing teachers, and also the system is designed to teach you colonial foolishness. I didn't even know those mounds were actually smoking until I saw them. And then I didn't know that it was essentially like supercharged, ecologically dense blue oxygen from this rainforest. And so I guess in my yeah, exactly. Exactly. In my last moments, I really believe in some people will say that they want to work across aisles. But I believe specifically coastal communities, specifically folks that are in the same boat must talk, because just the awareness of a place I could go to get super concentrated fresh air has already shifted my entire perspective. Just looking up for 5 days for the first time in my entire life, like always being my whole gaze having to look like looking up. I mean, anyways, I sound like a little stereotype. But also the last thing I just want to say is I'm focused on 3 initiatives. I think we need to conserve aggressively. I'm not trying to tell anybody how to live. I'm just telling you how, based on what I've seen and where I've been, how I'm doing it. So I'm trying to encourage and do agenda setting around herbal medicine, native plant protection, aggressive conservation and restoration. My push is for everybody to lean as far in a direction as they can with what they can, because my Black feminist teachings tell me if I can't do it alone, it's because I haven't done it cooperatively enough. And so aggressive protection, conservation, restoration, uh, making and protecting medicine, increasing our medicinal supplies, clean herbal medicine and access for those who need it is deeply important to me. And finally, the ancestral return I've been working on. And that's just around making space for these ancestors to be returned. I deal in human remains. There's about 90,000 Native American remains in the United States held within public institutions that have not yet been returned. And it usually falls apart around burial space. But of course, there are more. Everyone who's been colonized has ancestors being housed in their skeletal form in these basements in these different places. It's the bedrock of white supremacy, where they did all the pseudoscience to try to prove that we were inferior even while they were studying us. But anyways, this is kind of my little trifecta, and my approach to meet this moment is promoting conservation, ancestral return, and medicine. And so I just encourage people to leverage what they can in that way.
Jeri, thank you so much. Thank you to those who attended live, but thanks to those who will be watching it afterwards. I am so grateful for your sacred spirit, you sharing your ancestral wisdom with us, and just everything that you said. It felt like a prayer. And so thank you for being an answer to a prayer, and thank you for spending some time with me, and look forward to many more conversations with you.
Thank you as well.
Bye, everyone.